Concerns about tensions with North Korea and the Iran nuclear deal. During a photo op in the White House dining room, President Trump made this puzzling comment.
This was just before the Vegas shootings. But where we were concerned, this was just before the fires. This is just before the California fires broke out a year ago. Santa Rosa. And then we had LA. And we had the whole Napa thing. Then we have this year. Then we have the Redding tornado. Then we have, again, the Camp Fire, the Paradise Fire this year. So I'm sure the Vice President knows all about this. You're not a very Christian man, are you, Mr. Pence?
You guys know what this represents? Well,
what's the storming?
And now the president was asked again what he meant by calm before the storm, and he responded, "You'll find out." The White House has not clarified the comments further. Mr. Trump faces an October 15th deadline on the Iran nuclear deal. He is expected to refuse to certify that Iran is in compliance. CBS News White House and senior foreign affairs correspondent Margaret Brennan joins us now. She's at the White House. I share the question that was raised in that room, Margaret. What storm is the president referring to?
The White House is refusing to clarify what the president meant, and if you play out that full tape, you had reporters repeatedly say to the president, "Sir, what storm? Which storm? Are you talking about Iran? Are you talking about ISIS? What are you referring to?" It's a very unusual statement, and it's one that raises a lot of concern, not necessarily the people in that room, but here in Washington and around the world. It's not something that an American president does typically to sort of tease the idea of an impending crisis. Typically, it's one you try to play down and express you're in control of, but clearly the president was trying to send a message of strength, one he constantly refers to as one of the things that differentiates him. He often trots out his military, as you saw with that dinner. He was standing alongside all the combatant commanders, all the big military leaders here in the United States gathered with him here. This is often something that's done behind closed doors, but President Trump wanted the press there and wanted to make that statement. It was deliberate.
Margaret, during the campaign, he certainly wasn't coy at all. The president was very clear on what he wanted to do with the Iran nuclear deal. He wanted to scrap it all together. Now he's saying he wants to decertify it.
Yesterday, it was the calm before the storm as he met with senior military leaders. I'll roll that tape.
You guys know what this represents? Well, the calm before the storm.
What's the storming?
Could be the calm before the storm.
Look at Melania. Look at her face.
We have the world's great military people. We'll tell you that. And we're going to have a great evening. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Look at her face.
We have the world's the calm before the storm.
What's the storming?
Could be the calm before the storm.
Oh.
What storm is
We have the world's great military people. We'll tell you that. And we're going to have a great evening. Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
What storm, Mr. President?
You'll find out.
What storm, Mr. President? You'll find out. John Bolton's with us, former ambassador to the United Nations. He's laughing along with the rest of us. Have you any idea what the president might have meant by the calm before the storm?
No, other than they've got a lot of attention for his dinner, that's for sure.
Well, was he referring maybe to North Korea? That's a lot of people are thinking.
Well, there are a lot of options out there. Of course, there's the coming defeat of ISIS, but the continuing threat of Iran, both as a terrorist state and its nuclear program. North Korea, as you mentioned, the South China Sea, where China is building a new province, at least in their view. Russia interference in Eastern and Central Europe and the former Soviet Union. So there are a lot of potential flashpoints here, and I think it underlines just how dangerous a world is that we see.
But does he do this deliberately to keep our enemies on their toes, so to speak? Because you never know what he's going to do.
Torture works. You've praised Russia. You've said you want to ban some Muslims from coming to America. You've suggested there should be punishment for abortion. For many people in Britain, those sound like alarming beliefs. What do you say to our viewers at home who are worried about some of your views and worried about you becoming the leader of the free world?
This was your choice of a question. There goes that relationship.
On the issue that you raised with me, Laura, can I confirm that the president? I've been listening to the president, and the president has been listening to me. That's the point of having a conversation and a dialogue. And we have been discussing a number of topics. We'll carry on after this press conference meeting and discussing a number of other topics. And there will be times when we disagree and issues on which we disagree. The point of the special relationship is that we are able to have that open and frank discussion so that we are able to make that clear when it happens. But I'm clear also that there are many issues on which the United Kingdom and the United States stand alongside one another, many issues on which we agree. And I think, as I said yesterday in my speech, that we are at a moment now when we can build an even stronger special relationship, which will be in the interests not just of the UK and the United States, but actually in the interests of the wider world as well.
We have a great general who has just been appointed Secretary of Defense, General James Mattis, and he has stated publicly that he does not necessarily believe in torture or waterboarding, or however you want to define it.
News of the day. I want to ask you a question about your first topper there, in terms of the journalists who are here with the Committee to Protect Journalists. You're right. We did get a chance to talk with some of them, and as did you. And while we all appreciate the message that you send or you deliver from this podium every day, are you not at all concerned that message gets diluted a bit when you see what's going on just up the street at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, where there is essentially a full-on war between the president and one particular reporter in the White House is trying to.
I understand where you're going with this. I think we have to keep this.
Or is there a concern that your message of support for journalists, both here and abroad, more importantly abroad, perhaps, is somewhat diluted or somewhat hurt by what's going on and the rhetoric and the language that comes out of the leadership?
I know where you're going with this question, so let me just stop you and answer it there. No, and here's why. In the United States, journalists are able and allowed to freely practice their profession. We see that each and every day. Administration officials and others across the country sometimes take issue with incorrect, inaccurate reporting. We've had these debates often here. That is one thing. Journalists can do their jobs in the United States. These women, their family members have been detained, some of them. They've been forced out of their professions entirely. Some of them have been forced out of their countries. And as you all know far too well, some journalists have been detained, sentenced to many years in prison in other countries. So I think the situations are entirely different, and I would encourage you all to keep it into perspective. How journalists are handled and treated here in the United States versus the very real risks that they face overseas.
Trying to change that. I am not suggesting in any way that the threats and the prosecution that these people who you hosted, who you met with, is similar to what, or is it in any way like what is those of us in this room deal with. I am asking you if you are concerned at all that your message of support for them, for these journalists who you just hosted, is diluted or hurt or may not resonate as much as it did because of the situation that we see here in the United States. I am not trying to compare their situation to our situation.
I have seen how when we speak about the cases of some of these journalists, how much it has helped them, how much it has helped them in their home countries. Sometimes we don't speak about their cases when we think that speaking about their cases could hurt their cases. But I have seen firsthand how speaking to the realities that they face in their given countries has assisted them, has encouraged governments across the world to treat journalists better, to stop doing things like taxing them out of business, stop detaining them, and things of that nature. So what we do here at the State Department in speaking out in support of freedom of speech has helped.
I want to ask you about the sanctions that were imposed.
Okay. Because if you all would like to make this all about you and not talk about other things today, we can do that.
We cannot compare
journalists conduct themselves in this country to other countries. But certainly, you must agree that many of your close allies, very close allies, mistreat journalists, put them in prison, persecute them, and so on. And you seem to maybe issue a statement. I mean, I don't want to name countries, but you probably know what I'm talking about. You seem to issue a statement and stops there. So, you hold like foreign journalists to a different standard.
I disagree with that.
One day, a community reeling from what felt like insurmountable tragedy was struck again. A fast-moving wildfire, sparking widespread evacuations 24 hours after a mass shooting.
It's kind of like Mother Nature kicking us while we're down.
Ventura County Sheriff Sergeant Eric Busha was on scene after a shooter opened fire at the Borderline Bar and Grill. 12 people shot and killed, including Sergeant Ron Helis, his friend and colleague of nearly 30 years.
If ever there was somebody that embodied the word hero, he's it. I mean, he died a hero.
Then, after working 19 hours, Busha and his family, along with thousands of others, were forced to evacuate. Dozens of homes destroyed.
How do you deal with all that? I don't know. There's no playbook for this, to be honest with you. To have these two incidents just right overlapping each other is unprecedented.
Last night on 60 Minutes, they told correspondent Bill Whitaker that gunman Stephen Paddock apparently had been preparing for days and no detail was overlooked. Bill is here and we will talk to him in a moment. But first, we have part of the 60-minute report on what the officers saw.
What do you see?
An armory.
An armory.
So many guns, so many magazines, stacks and stacks of magazines everywhere, just in suitcases, all neatly stacked against pillars that were in the room, all stacked up, rifles placed all throughout, all kinds of monitors and electrical equipment he had in there. It just looked like almost a gun store.
Shell casings all over the floor. Scan of what coming in the room with my rifle.
Any apparent wounds to his head, but I did see a lot of blood that had come out of his mouth.
Well, there was a bloody revolver, I think, nearby him that was on the ground, consistent with him shooting himself. What else did you see?
I saw a few phones, laptops, a couple of laptops he had in there, a lot of drills.
Yeah,
a lot of drills and drill bits, all kinds of tools.
This was eerie.
Very eerie. And the dust from the explosive breach, and then you got the flashing lights. I mean, it looks straight up like out of a movie.
I'm just a sweet transvestite from transsexual Transylvania. Play you a sign. You look like you're both pretty groovy. Or if you want something visual, that's not too abysmal.
Step at a time. But we'll recover. We'll get through it. I don't know. There's no playbook for this, to be honest with you. To have these two incidents just right overlapping each other is unprecedented.